Bitcoin is trading around $85,000 at the time of recording, and I just kind of want to give you guys a very quick weekend update of what's going on and what I think is going to happen next. Now, obviously, I kind of called for a weekend pump because usually what happens is when we have such an aggressive sell-off, there's always a low liquidity based weekend where we just get like a pump out of nowhere that ultimately creates some kind of CME gap that kind of gives reason for us to kind of revisit later on in the future for just a reason to dip, because obviously Bitcoin doesn't need any kind of reasons to go up, but it does need a reason to go down. And so I think that obviously there's been a lot of depression when it comes to the price of Bitcoin, and there's a lot of different kind of rumors going around, like the whole like Bitcoin fork that's kind of coming up that's going to get voted on. The government's kind of seizing these like pig slaughtering exploit scam type of thing out of China. They confiscated I think 100,000 Bitcoin, something like that. The US government did. And then you obviously have this other kind of like left field type of theory, which I kind of do subscribe to, but I think that it's a little bit nuanced, where basically it's a fight between the current government of the United States, because they're very pro Bitcoin and crypto blockchain, and they don't really like the banks. And then you have this kind of like sort of rivalry between them and like the Fed and JP Morgan Chase and all that kind of stuff, because obviously the Federal Reserve is a private entity, but they're very close with JP Morgan. And so obviously we know that fiat is basically it's like a kind of like a regular day Ponzi scheme, right? Like it's just not really necessarily backed by anything. It just gets inflated. People print so much money and there's no really way to pay off the debt. And they basically just use this because it's kind of like a weapon across like the world, right? Because yes, all fiat goes to zero over time, but the basically the United States dollar is the strongest of like the worst type of currency, if you will. That's why you see like gold surging to all-time highs and all this kind of stuff as well. And so you could make the case that maybe, certain people, certain powers they're kind of trying to suppress the price and turn people away from Bitcoin. That is a big theory that's kind of going on, especially with this like whole hack thing as well. There's like this, there's a lot of different kind of like legal kind of frameworks where basically governments are able to seize any sort of Bitcoin that is part of some sort of like internal investigation. And so it does look like a lot of these accomplices from the people that were caught up in this whole like massive scandal, it does look like they've been kind of like rushing to sell all their Bitcoin because they'd rather do that than risk their whole sort of seizures and assets being frozen. So that could be a scenario that's going on. I really don't know. Obviously, if you're somebody that's like a 4-year cycle believer, which I'm not really of that opinion just yet at this point, because I think that every single 4-year cycle coincides with different kind of macro environment stuff going on. And so I'd rather track like the whole like liquidity cycles, the business cycles, kind of where we are like on a monetary standpoint, like whether we're in quantitative tightening or easing, because obviously when we're in quantitative tightening, that means that money is being pulled out of the system. And when we're in quantitative easing, basically the Federal Reserve and the governments are basically stimulating the economy to promote growth, which is really good for risk on assets like Bitcoin and things of that nature. So there's just it's just a huge mess, frankly speaking. Like there's just so much going on. There's no shortage of, bad news. Everyone's, max bearish, like crypto Twitter is horrible. Like it's just, I don't even go on my phone. Like I go in to check in with like my, my team, like my group, all that kind of stuff. But it's a horrible place to be if you're just somebody who's just maybe new to crypto and like trying to look for like guidance or like insights. You do not want to go there. And so that's typically what you see around some sort of like local low or even like the low of the cycle. And so I'm not saying the Bitcoin's not going to go lower. I think that, obviously on time frames, I've always been saying we need to hold above $75,000. I didn't think we were going to get this close this quick. That could be for a number of reasons. But I think if we can keep that $75,000 level, I think that would be good. And I think that would be, a relatively good place to be where it comes to like the bottom. And I think if we can somehow go to like $96,000 to about $100,000, I think if we can get above those levels, I think that it increases the chances that we're not going into this whole, bear market. Obviously, from a technical analysis standpoint, things look horrible. We've closed the 50-week simple moving average last week. It looks like we're going to close it below again this week, which pretty much does solidify a bear market. But I'm not ready to make that call just yet, just because of what's going on in the broader scheme of things. And if I was somebody that was like a big boy, like I had the power to control all these prices, that's exactly how I would get so many people out of the trade. Because when you factor in all this like bullish kind of cases when it comes to 2026 with like quantitative easing, rate cuts dropping, a very pro crypto administration, a lot of good legal framework, it's very hard to imagine that even if the stock market starts rallying like crazy, money printing is going on, like Bitcoin's not going to catch some sort of bid, especially with a very pro-crypto administration. Not to mention, like, you know, Trump and his, you know, the whole cabinet, like they need to look good for midterms and like the whole outlook on crypto anyway. So it just doesn't make any sense to me why Bitcoin would just go down only, you know, in this whole other macro environment. So I'm not ready to make the call just yet. I do think that we need to be very careful when it comes to these levels though, because obviously people can get wrecked very easily. You know, obviously I don't give financial advice, but you know, a lot of people just, they never sell, they kind of hold on way too long, or they're holding on to the wrong assets. And so you lose a lot of purchasing power that way. Now, obviously if you have a long time frame horizon, you're mostly like in Bitcoin and, you know, kind of more secure layer ones, you're going to be okay on a long time horizon, but the opportunity cost of, you know, selling and accumulating more, it's not as good. And so what I think is, do I think that we could see a little bit more of a downturn? Yes. Do I think that we're 5 to 10% away from an actual bottom? Yes. Could I be wrong? Yes. But that is a risk I'm willing to take. And I've actually added to my bags. If you guys follow me on X or Threads or whatever, I told you the 3 altcoins that I purchased. If you guys don't already, or you're not already in it, I have a free Telegram where I kind of update you guys with what I'm doing. You can find that, I think, on my profile. It's a free, you know, community. And yeah, I'm not really changing my thesis. I don't think anything's fundamentally changed from Bitcoin. I think that the players are completely different. And I think the stakes are much higher than they've ever been. So yeah, short term, I'm looking around $75,000 for a very bearish case scenario. And bullish case, if we can somehow get to about $100,000, close out above a weekly, and ideally charge for like 105, 106, I think if we can turn that point into support, I think it's a pretty good chance that we're going to at least tackle the previous all-time high, and then we'll see, we'll see where we go from there. Again, if you're not already, make sure you subscribe, turn on your bell notifications. Everything I say here is very time sensitive. If there's any topics in general with crypto or finance that you want me to cover, drop them in the comments, and I'll try to do that for you guys. Trade safe, guys. Bye.